HOA Karen gets sweet, instant karma for messing with the tree that isn't hers, posted by Noise Hens. So some brief backstory is necessary to understand the direness of Karen's situation. Karen, along with her daughter, owns a house in a street along with 7 other people, including me. This street is somewhat private, although it isn't gated. It shares many resources and services that sets it apart from the rest of the community. Basically, it was originally empty land in the middle of an already existing neighborhood bought privately by a group who built houses and sold them. For these reasons, this street has an HOA representative, homeowners association, and they share things like lawn maintenance and street repair cost. For example, the street splits the cost for repairing stuff like the street lights, and the people that mow the lawns do the entire street at a time. Karen and her daughter are rarely seen in this small street, and they instead rent their house out to newcomers every few months or so. I have only seen them in person a few times since I moved here. On their most recent return a few days ago, they decided to have the tree out in their front yard trimmed down before the next tenant arrives. Unfortunately, this tree belongs to the street, and she has no jurisdiction tampering with it, and she knows it. She made a halfway attempt to call the HOA board, and then when they did not reply right away, she took the initiative to cut the tree to her desires. This morning, a group of workers came in a truck and loud power tools to cut off several branches from this large tree. The Indian dude came out first to complain, and later came the old lady. They've both been living here for a long time, and they understand the rules clearly. The conversation was distant from my house, especially since I chose not to go outside and join the argument, but it went along the lines of the following. "Hey, you can't cut that tree," Indian guy says. Karen says, "Well, it's on my property." "Actually, it's not. Tell them to stop cutting it. You need to contact the HOA first." I did, and they didn't respond, so it's not a big deal if I just trim it, okay? Old lady chimes in, "Any change affects the value of the entire street and every house on it. You have to stop it." "Oh my goodness, it's just a tree. Just give me a break, okay?" For those that don't understand, the entire street sort of has a common theme to it, where every house has a similar design, and each having a tree is part of said design. Stripping this mature tree down to a couple of branches completely ruins the look of the street. Indian dude walks up to the workers who are basically already finished and says, "Guys, please just stop for now." Karen steps in front of him. "Hey, back off." He puts his hand on her shoulder to push her away, and she says, "Stop being aggressive." It goes on for about 30 minutes. The entire time, Karen is being extremely rude, interrupting people and basically whining incessantly. Indian dude, old lady, and the other neighbors watching knew that they couldn't do anything without contacting the HOA first. They certainly didn't want to touch her, and they couldn't do anything with the workers because they were hired by Karen. This entire time, her daughter didn't say anything and stood at the doorway of her house. The workers continue with the tree, and in no time it was finished. About an hour passes when Indian dude and old lady return with news from the HOA. It was true that Karen couldn't touch the tree, and everyone knew that. But what Karen didn't know was that the consequences were extremely straightforward and relentless. When they began to explain to Karen her remaining options, she had a witchy smirk of victory on her face, but it didn't take long for it to be completely wiped away. HOA policies dictate that she has to completely replace the tree, which means that she needs to hire people to come dig the tree out, pay for a new tree, pay for it to be planted, and pay for the lawn that will be inevitably torn up as the tree is being replaced. If she does not comply, her house will be put on lien and be no longer considered an extension of our private street. For those that aren't fluent in real estate terms like me, this means that Karen cannot sell, rent, or refinance her property until said conditions are met. Even if she complies right away, her new tenant will be delayed at least a week or more while the tree is being dug up. This is just such a sweet and fitting end to her entitled attitude. In total, she'll be set back thousands of dollars for essentially nothing except lacking consideration of those around her. I'm not entirely clear on the cost, but I expect it to be at least 10 grand. Moral of the story, don't screw around with trees. They have countless lawsuit and HOA strings attached to them. and don't be a jerk to your neighbors. Now, to explain why Karen deserves her justice, I forgot to mention that she did flip everyone off and threatened to call a lawyer. She acted really childish overall and kept repeating the same phrase, something like, "You can't touch me, I did nothing wrong," over and over while interrupting people. Her daughter wasn't too much better, but you can't really blame her for trying to defend her mother a little bit. She probably just didn't understand what her mother really did. Her daughter was like, "Stop shouting, don't get aggressive," and so on. After talking with some of my neighbors, it turns out that Karen was a bee long before I moved here. A long time ago, there was a rule that you couldn't park your car on your driveway, which most people thought was stupid. I think it's stupid too. The rule was set when the street was built because people wanted it to look nice or something. Apparently, Karen took this rule way too seriously and kept on giving tickets to the old lady's husband. I mean, come on, what a way to get to know your next door neighbor. Before long, the entire street voted the law out 7-1. Guess who wanted to keep it? Karen also locked the back gate of the street closed and didn't give the key to anyone because she thought she was entitled to control who gets to use the community gate. Too bad I wasn't there at the argument because I could have transcribed more of what they said. Karen kept on trying to change the subject and put blame on the old lady for letting her bamboo fall into her backyard. Come on, old lady was sick that day, so what a butt move for arguing with a sick old lady. I'd also like to mention the trees. Yes, trees. I realized after looking closer at her yard that she cut were 2 cypress trees and a deciduous tree that grows red seeds in hard pods that I forgot the name of. The cypress trees she cut were towering and magnificent. She trimmed them down halfway and they will never regrow because both trees are at least 20 years old. This one's going to be nasty. It's called "Threaten My Pregnant Wife Over Parking. Enjoy Your Misdemeanor, HOA Jerk," posted by PR Throwaway 83094. This was last year. I just sold my home in my HOA. About 5 years ago, I bought a 1,500 square foot townhome condo in an up-and-coming town, right in the downtown area. This is a valuable property, with home prices having increased 35% since I purchased. This was a wonderful area in walking distance of everything that I loved as a single bachelor. When I moved in, all my neighbors were wonderful. We all got along great, well, except for one person. She belonged to the HOA board, but was moving on because you can only serve 8 years. We'll call her Gimpy J. Gimpy J is a 65-plus-year-old widow whose husband died unexpectedly from a heart attack. She doesn't have much to do. She met a man online and moved on, and, well, I was happy for her. Talking to my passive neighbors, I hear bits and pieces of why things are at the HOA because of Gimpy J and another woman who had to move because of age. On the board, the two of them pick on residents. They change the landscaping from mulch to pine needles. They stop upkeep on the pool deck because they hate kids. They reported one house for anything and everything because their kids were too loud. She picked on a woman with multiple sclerosis because Gimpy J was feeding feral cats and attracting raccoons and possums near our homes, and animal control was called. Residents did not like her. I got married and my wife has been living with me for 2 years now at this point. We are very happy. During this time, Gimpy J began spending more and more time with her new boyfriend. He lives about an hour away from our house in the country. She would initially spend the weekend and then a week there until she began living there all the time with very little time spent here. Maybe 15 minutes to 2 hours a month would be at our complex. Now, at our complex, there is only one rule on parking. Each resident is entitled to 2 spots close to their building, but not necessarily in front of your unit, and there is no limit to parking spots you may occupy. Close to it is the key word. We have new folks on the board who are all under 40 years of age, and the place is starting to get spruced up. We have some friends over regularly, and they park in front of our unit. Gimpy J had 2 hip replacements done, and we had not seen her in about 7 months. In our little area of the complex consists of 8 townhomes that face each other, 4 on one side and 4 on the other. There are 8 spots for 3 homes and a handicap spot for one of our neighbors. Gimpy J started coming back around in January for longer periods, a day on the weekend to go out downtown or to visit friends. She started complaining that we were in her spots. Again, there are no assigned spots. we were willing to move our friends' vehicles for her to another empty spot, that is, until she started occupying 2 spots at a time with her vehicle. This behavior continued as she would come in taking 2 spots anytime she was here. The rules in the master deed say that no vehicle can take more than 1 spot without written permission from the board of directors or the property management group, and cannot continue for more than 2 days without permission. This was to account for residents moving in and out. Suddenly, that spring, my wife had a medical issue and was hospitalized for 4 days and on disability for 8 weeks. My mom was the only family member on both sides that had the capability of coming down to where we lived to help us out. She drove down and we needed to occupy 3 spots. I promptly let our property management company know and the board of directors know what was happening, providing them with my mom's make, model, and plate number, and that she would be here 6 to 8 weeks, just in case anyone had an issue. Gimpy J's first time home in 6 weeks, we had a car in front of her house, but she had room for her vehicle. She marched over and banged, and I mean banged loud on that door, demanding we move the car, and tried to open my front door and walk in my home. Yes, she tried to enter my home. It shook my dog, who peed herself, it was that loud, who in turn growled and chased her out. I promptly told her there was no assigned parking, and the rule is 1 car, 1 spot. We moved a car out of respect one last time and saw that she occupied 2 spots with it per usual. The next time it happened, 2 weeks later, we refused to move our vehicle. We also began taking pictures for our records and communicating with our HOA of Gimpy J's erratic behavior. She continued to arrive, bang on our door, scream at us for having a car parked in her spot. One time, banging on the door, she dented the frame with her keys. A few additional times when we were not home, she would come in and park, occupying 2 spots. I would take more pictures for my records in case something happened because of her erratic behavior. Finally, it happened. About this time last year, I was at the gym and I get a call from my mom and my wife, frantic that someone is going to tow my wife's car. I drive home as fast as I can, and it's Gimpy J's boyfriend's son and his girlfriend, whom we had never met. This jerk, who doesn't even live here and has no business here, is screaming at us and insulting my pregnant wife and mother. He shouts, "My mother-in-law pays X dollars a month for these spots. You jerks are breaking the rules. I'ma tow that there SUV." All while drinking beer. Now, we know he can't do anything except scream and try to intimidate us outside. He calls his mother-in-law, who is not married to his father, about the situation. Gimpy J drives an hour to our complex. When she gets here, she parks her car behind all 3 of ours and gets out, blocking us in. And I had had enough. I quickly snapped some pictures and I called the police. I will not feel unsafe or be harassed in my neighborhood by people who do not live there or are even just barely there. Gimpy J realizes I called the police and she moves her car. I print out all of my documentation, pictures, communication from the HOA, all of it. I shower quickly because I'm disgusting from the gym and throw on a nice polo shirt and shoes. Pregnant wife sits in her rocking chair and my mother sits calmly at the kitchen table. The police arrive and we can see them hollering, waving arms wildly and screaming. The police come to the door and we kindly open up. Gimpy J tries to walk in before I block her and ask her to leave my property and invite the police officers inside. We apologize that we even have to call them over something so petty, but our neighbor is acting crazy and her behavior has been escalating. We explain what's happening. We show them communication from the HOA, show them all the pictures. The officer quickly had enough of these white trash pieces of crap. He imposes a no trespass order on my porch and will not let her near my property. If she steps foot on our walkway, she is in violation of the order and she will be arrested. We watch him go back out and explain calmly to her, and she starts screaming along with her boyfriend's kid and his girlfriend. This goes on for a while. and the officer calls for backup and a second car arrives promptly. Gimpy J promptly declares it's her property too, she pays her fees, and that he can't do that because everything is community property outside of a home. She goes and marches up to my stoop and he arrests her, charges her with disorderly conduct and harassment. The police then tell Gimpy J's boyfriend's son to go home. He gets in his truck with his white trash girlfriend and they drive off. As soon as he hits the road outside of our complex, the second police officer pulls him over for a DUI. That's right, the drunk guy screaming at my wife and mother had been drinking the entire time and he was loaded. Police couldn't do anything in the complex, but could when he hit the main road. Both of them were hauled off to the jail and we stopped hearing from them about parking. 2 days later, Gimpy J and her boyfriend show up to the complex and they park her boyfriend's car in our lot and leave it parked in one spot to ensure that it's hers. Well, they drive off and we don't hear from them in a week and no one is home. Since Gimpy J's boyfriend does not live here and his car is abandoned, I called the HOA to report it. They came and towed his SUV. Gimpy J put her house on the market 8 weeks later. Screw HOAs. HOA Revenge, posted by HOA1 Throwaway. Since I've seen a few posts lately about out-of-control HOAs, I figured I'd add my 2 cents to the fray. My family and I used to live in a fairly upper-middle-class neighborhood that had an HOA. The HOA seemed pretty mellow and dedicated to their original purpose and intent, which was maintaining property values. As these things usually happen, a few new people got voted in, and things started getting a bit more OCD and militant. Here are a few examples. We had to throw away our basketball hoop because the backboard was opaque and the new requirement was glass backboards only. We got a ticket because my dad forgot that Monday was Memorial Day and he put the trash out. Of course, trash collection had been pushed back to Tuesday, so we got a fine for having the trash can out overnight. We went on vacation for a week and the grass got a bit longer than usual, but nothing unreasonable. Got threatening letters and a fine. We weren't allowed to have cars parked on the street for any reason. And my biggest pet peeve was that anyone under 18 had to be accompanied to the pool by their parent. My 17-year-old self wasn't too fond of having to get my mom to come bake in the sun anytime I wanted to go for a swim, nor was she. I was on a Navy JROTC field trip to a naval base that I will leave unnamed for anonymity reasons, and I stumbled upon what I still regard to be one of my greatest ideas. I was in the Navy Exchange, basically Walmart for Navy personnel, looking at some of their surplus stuff when I came across an ejection seat dye marker. These are those very powerful dye markers that are attached to ejection seats so that in the event of a water landing after ejection, the pilot can be found easily, floating in the middle of a huge patch of green dyed water. So I bought it for $8, which is a bargain at any price, and then I took it home. One night, after the HOA instituted an unenforceable 10 p.m. curfew for adolescents under 18, I took a little stroll over to the pool and tossed that bad Larry on in. Much to my delight and nervous horror, it worked exactly as designed. The whole pool was a neon green in a matter of a minute or two. Of course, I got the heck out of Dodge. The next day, as I drove past on my way home from school, I noticed that the pool was empty, but it still looked very, very green. In the ensuing weeks, I came to find out that the pool had to be drained, 660,000 gallons of water, and a professional power washing company had to be brought in to clean the pool basin concrete, which had absorbed the dye. And then the pool had to be refilled and retreated with all of the relevant chemicals. All told, I think it cost around $10,000 to the HOA. 2 years later, the HOA president was busted by the IRS and arrested for embezzling $70,000 worth of HOA funds. He went to the big house for a couple of years. And before anyone tears into me for wasting water, this was in the South, not California. We have more water than we want down here. The HOA takes over and destroys my property, but I'm not even part of the HOA. Click on the video on your screen. You don't want to miss the fallout of this crazy story, and I'll see you there.